I'm eating 1,200 calories a day and my body weight's not moving nowhere. I'm not losing fat. I think my metabolism's broken. Now, if you've ever heard those words or said those words and you think that your metabolism's broken, or even wondering, is that even a thing? Can your metabolism be broken? Then this video is going to be for you. Now, I'm going to throw a quick caveat out there. Some people at the back end of a diet may need to eat less than 1,200 calories, but it is going to be few and far between. And those people tend to be either already on the lighter side, female that are very light, or at the back end of a bodybuilding prep when we've got to get that last little bit of fat off. But for 95% of people, probably no, 99% of people, you shouldn't need to be going that low. And if you think you're going that low and nothing's moving, well, I'm going to show you why your metabolism is not broken. Now, in this video, I'm going to discuss 3 different studies that were done. These are absolutely brutal. Men that were starved down to pretty much skin and bone. People that were made to train 4.5 hours a day. And someone who ran a marathon 6 days a week for 5 months straight. And not in any one of these studies, any one of them, did fat loss ever completely stop. Not a single person in these studies showed that fat loss ever truly stops. Right, so let me just clear it up a little bit so we can break it down. You've got this idea that your body's got a bit of a dimmer switch. It's got this little switch that you can turn up or down. When you start acting like a bit of a lunatic, you start training like a madman, doing loads of cardio, eating fuck all food, your body has a bit of a switch to essentially adapt, and it's essentially something to keep you from dying. Now, this is where people then start considering this starvation mode, when it's not a thing, but your body does go into a slight preservation mode where it tries to slow you down. Now, this is what science calls metabolic adaptation. Now, with this being said, people seem to assume that their metabolism is broken and metabolic adaptation actually stops them from losing fat, when it actually doesn't. There's this actual assumption that your switch can be turned all the way down to the point where you don't lose fat anymore. When if that was the case, we wouldn't have people starving and malnourished in third world countries. So for people to assume that they have this broken metabolism and calories in versus calories out is not a real thing, and starvation mode actually limits them and stops them from losing fat, it's a myth. And these studies that I'm about to run you through prove that. First one we've got is in the 1940s, the Minnesota starvation experiment. Now, this was a scientist back in the midst of World War II that was essentially trying to learn how to get people back to full health after starvation. But it's a little bit inhumane to starve people for a study. So we had to find people that were willing to just volunteer and participate. So these participants actually took part in the study for a year and got down to around 5.5% to 5% body fat, which is pretty fucking lean for this study, which required starvation, extreme methods, and they lost a lot of muscle tissue at the same time. As well as eating fuck all, they actually walked for 22 miles a week, which is a lot of walking when you don't have a lot of food. These lot went mental about food, dreaming about it, cutting recipes out of little magazines and starting to genuinely think about food all the time. It was the first thing they'd think about when they woke up and the last thing they thought about when they went to bed. To me, it sounds like a bodybuilding prep. So what did their metabolism do? By the end of the process, they actually burned 1,500 calories less than what was expected, which shows how much that switch got dimmed down from the extreme dieting method. But here's the bit that matters. Even at that point of starvation, where their calories, the amount that they burn, has significantly dropped, they still lost weight. Yeah, probably losing a significant amount of muscle as well, but they were still losing weight on the scale, which showed in that study, in the starvation experiment, that starvation mode is not a real thing. Second one we've probably all seen. It's The Biggest Loser. Now, that was in USA. I used to watch it when I was younger. It's the giant scale. It's the dramatic amount of weight that gets lost. I think it's 30 weeks worth of dieting. And you won't fucking believe it, but the amount of time that they were training every single day or most days in the week was 4.5 hours. So as well as aggressively cutting calories back, they were training 4.5 hours worth a day, which is mental to think about. Now, this one out of the 3 that I'm going to tell you about was where they've seen the biggest adaptation. Because they're literally going into starvation. They're cutting their calories extremely low. Their expenditure is through the roof. They're doing loads and eating fuck all and losing a significant amount of weight. Now, eventually, your body's going to try and fight back. And that's exactly what it did. But it still didn't stop things. They actually went back to the participants 6 years later and did a test to see where the metabolism was. And they found out that a majority of these people had regained the weight. If anything, the amount of weight that they had at the start, it was pretty much back to that baseline, and their metabolism was still relatively suppressed, which obviously then makes it easier to gain the weight, which is why a majority of them did. Which just goes to show why an aggressive approach isn't always the best approach. If anything, it's never really the best approach for a majority of people. Yes, it gets the weight off, but it teaches you nothing. It teaches you fuck all. And just like this experiment in The Biggest Loser, most people who diet aggressively, who do loads of cardio, who eat fuck all calories, will gain the weight back because they've learnt nothing. Now the third one, the race across the USA. This one's quite interesting because although body fat and weight was measured, they actually were fed a reasonable amount of food to be able to do this. So it was 3,000 miles covered on foot. A marathon a day, 6 days a week for 5 months, I think. Now this is fucking nuts because these lot were obviously experienced endurance athletes. That's how they managed to be able to do this, otherwise they'd be fucking cooked. But at the same time, these lot still, even when reasonably fed, were in an unintentional deficit through the amount of activity that they were doing. Now, what they found is, outside of doing the marathon a day, they just didn't want to move. That's the dimmer switch being turned down. The fidgeting, everything, those little movements that you've got throughout the day, the hand movements that you kind of see me doing now when I'm talking, all of that slowed down. And that is just due to the fact of the preserving energy. It's your body essentially starting to slow down to preserve and conserve what it needs to be able to use for expenditure and to aid that recovery process as well. Now, the guys within this lost about 2 to 2.5% worth of body fat during the study, which for someone who is relatively lean, an endurance-based athlete, is a significant amount of weight, considering they were fed reasonably well. But the reason why it's interesting is because although they were fed a good amount of food and enough to be able to get through the experiment, they still lost weight. 3 different studies. Starvation, guys being taken down to the extreme lows of body fat without being fed properly. Training 4.5 hours a day and extreme calorie cuts. And then you've got the marathon a day covering about 3,000 miles. 3 extremes. In each of those, the dimmer switch got turned down quite significantly. Some worse than others, depending on what they were doing. But not once in any of those studies did it ever completely switch off. Despite the aggression, it always was allowed to move and people was always able to lose a little bit more. So let's be honest with each other right now. If you're the one that says that you've got a broken metabolism, we know, judging from those studies, unless you've got some sort of hormonal issue or something that's underlying that hasn't been checked, you've not got a broken metabolism. And even if there's some hormonal issue which is stopping you from losing weight or limiting the amount of weight that you can lose, it will never completely stop it. It just means that your body would work differently. But for 99% of the population and people and anyone watching this video, your metabolism works exactly fucking fine. It's down to a couple of things. Now, those couple of things that I'm talking about is either eating more than you realise or burning less calories than you think. And I would actually put money on that for a majority of people. And before anyone gets a bit of the I'm not calling you a liar. I'm not saying you're straight up doing it on purpose. Some people just genuinely don't know how to track properly. Some people have a misunderstanding of calories and what's in what. And some people use their Apple Watches or their Garmins as gospel in terms of the amount of calories that gets burnt and then thinking they can eat what's been burnt or just a little bit less and still be in a calorie deficit, when it doesn't work that way. It's not lying. It just comes down to a lack of understanding of what to do and how to do it properly. That's the simple reality, really. The little bit of butter that's getting put on your bagels, the bit of peanut butter that's getting put in your oats, the extra bit of dark chocolate that you're having here and there, the bit of jam that you're having on your bread, the splash of oil that you're putting in your pans to cook your food through the day, the kind of pop that you might be having that, again, contains calories because you're not getting the zero sugar one. All of these things will add up to equate to more calories through the day. Or you're simply just not burning enough calories. So you're intaking more than you realise and you're not burning enough because you might actually be tracking correctly. And if you are tracking correctly, then it may be a case of just needing to burn a few more calories because then it's a case of doing more. But the answer isn't to go all in completely and cut your calories right down to fucking zero and do loads of cardio, because that is when things do slow down, and that is what we call crash dieting, which is where we can lose the weight and potentially stick to it to lose the weight, but you also put yourself at risk of losing a decent amount of muscle. And I'm hoping if you follow me or subscribe to me, you don't want to look like a string bean and you want to keep some of your tissue. You don't follow the approach that they used in the Minnesota experiment where they just drop the calories to the fucking ground and pretty much starve yourself. What you need to do is go gradual. You need to bring calories down slowly. So start off at a set point. For most people, they need to just think about tracking their calories and understanding what they have day to day and then gradually bringing calories down from there. And the same goes for cardio. You don't go from doing fuck all to try and doing an hour every day. you'll burn out psychologically. You do start to take a bit of a backseat, and motivation, when it dips, you definitely ain't going to continue it because it's just too aggressive for you to stick to. The thing with 99% of people, they don't have a broken metabolism. They just aren't consistent enough for long enough, or they aren't aware of what's going in, or they aren't doing enough to burn enough calories through the week to see that scale weight come down. Those are the three main things. Now, they're fixable, but that's not a broken metabolism that's the problem. That's an awareness, and that's an understanding of what to do problem. So although metabolic adaptation is a real thing and your body does like to slow down and you will burn less calories and you will start to move a little bit slower to preserve energy, it doesn't completely limit you from dropping body fat. So if you are in a position right now where you're struggling to drop body fat, you are not broken, your metabolism's not fucked. And if you know someone that says it is, they're probably lying because they're just either eating a little bit too much, not tracking their food intake properly, or doing not enough. So for most people, it's a case of getting accurate with what's going in your gob and making sure that you're doing enough that you can stick to and be consistent with for long enough to see that scale weight continuously come down. And being willing to push a little bit harder maybe if you need to, but also understanding that it isn't about going hard or going home. It's about doing enough to be consistent to make a fat loss phase last. Now, if you like this video and you want to stick around for more videos, whether it's educational or me just going through my Ironman prep, which is happening right now, then as you can see from the bike, then you might want to subscribe to the channel. But appreciate you watching the video if you got this far. And if you did like the video, then make sure you do drop it a like, and I'll catch you in the next one.